Hey, so welcome to what might be a podcast, but we don't yet know.
The Nameless podcast.
Yeah, we're here at Nico's Photography Show. I'm Nico. We have Harold joining us, and YouTube recently introduced podcasting, so we're going to try to see what to do with this. It is well, let's start by introducing ourselves. I said I'm Nico. So I run Nico's Photography Show. I work at camerastore.com with a K. It's not advertised or paid. It's where we work, and we wanted to mention it because we kind of both work here.
I mean, we're also literally here.
Yeah, we're at the office. So I basically do YouTube videos about film photography and in the industry and news and tutorials and all kinds of things. And we do have a lot of talks at work, which many times look more interesting to a lot of people than probably to us because it's work. But we wanted to do a podcast talking about it. So that's what I do here on YouTube and at work. And Harold runs Valoy.
Yeah, so I'm the Valoy guy. If you haven't seen Valoy, it's basically I started a brand for camera scanning. We make equipment for making it easy to scan film at home using a digital camera. Here's the ad. And gotta sell stuff. And I was absorbed as a person and as a brand by Camera Store. Started as a collaboration and then it was just absorbed. So at this point, Valoy is it's a brand of Camera Store, and I'm now with Nico a co-owner of.
Oh yeah,
Camera
I didn't
Store.
say I also co-own Camera Store.
Yeah.
And why we're doing this, why we're explaining this, is because that I think is better. We don't want to hide the fact that we do work in the industry and we get paid by selling cameras and selling digitizing material and so on. So our opinions in this podcast are coming more as a personal opinion, but we do have obviously titles and responsibilities.
I mean, it's not like we have huge stakes and make lots of money from Camera Store, but we do have kind of a bias.
Yeah, and it's better to explain. And we probably will mention things like that in the future through the channel, through the videos that we make more of these. There's no name to the podcast. We don't really know. So if this runs, we will name it something. If it not, we will just keep it as is. But once we've talked about that and what this is supposed to be, let's start with, we're still not sure we want to go monotopic on the podcast. What we will be talking about here, I think it'll be a healthy amount of industry news, well, with our opinions, our personal takes on the industry news. It'll be a bit about maybe our personal photography, why we're shooting or not shooting certain things, maybe sharing stuff we bought and stuff on. I don't think we'll have interviews with other people or things like that. That is not exactly the point of this. It's more like us talking about stuff, photography related. But yeah, projects that are coming up either from us personally or professionally, maybe even. But yeah.
Yeah, it kind of sparks from this. I used to watch the news, and then I started working here, and Nico started working here at kind of the same time. And by news, I mean the Nicosphotographyshow news. What do you call them? And NPS news.
Well, I like to make acronyms for everything I do because
so this is the NPP.
Yeah, probably. It's basically because it's really easy to make the files on the computer. So, for example, I have Nico's Photography Show is NPS, which is funny also, is Nikon's professional service. And people here at work have t-shirts that say NPS, so I always find it funny. Then I have NPN, which is Nico's Photography News. Then I have the Camera Store work I usually call KS, Camera Rescue CR. And then if I do Valoy, I just put Valoy because Valoy doesn't really go well with acronyms.
To me, it's VL.
Is it acronyms? Is that what acronyms mean?
Yeah, right.
Okay, I don't really know.
Abbreviations? I don't know.
But yeah, so...
But yeah, so it started from us kind of I realized that when the news came out, we had already talked about the topics that were like interesting topics in the news and in much more depth. And we've kind of been toying with this idea of making a podcast for over a year.
I told Harold about this idea of doing these talks on camera because we have pretty good chemistry. I think we're both pretty blunt and pretty twats, like in the same way. So you'll hear us, I'll say bitch at each other, but like that because it's what we do. at work. And someone told me, I think 2 months ago, they were like, every time you and me talk together at work, it's like, fuck you, no, do this, get the screwdriver. So I thought it was funny, and I thought we should do. Plus, we do talk about industry. But yeah, talking about the industry and stuff like that. It's going to be opinion based, so most of it won't have real criteria to it. We're not newspaper. This is not the news. I try to be objective in the news, even though sometimes I get a little subjective. But this is going to be fully subjective, not so objective.
Yeah.
So expect things to be completely wrong, partially wrong, or maybe right, not the other way around. So today we're going to be talking, I guess, about Kodak Alaris being for sale. I haven't done the news on this yet.
Wait, it wasn't in the last? No, you didn't do the week.
I've been
last week.
skipping the news due to sometimes his fault, sometimes my fault.
Yeah, usually I walk in while he's doing the research, and then we end up doing a talk like this, and
while having a beer.
Yeah, and an hour later, it's no news.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, for anybody wondering, the news are research shot and edited on Wednesday afternoon nowadays. After work. So after 8 hours of cameras and films and clients and quotes and things, I close the door and start researching. The problem is the door doesn't seem to give the impression that it's closed.
It's not very good at being closed.
Yeah, and then it is really easy for me to be like sidetracked to not doing the news. So sorry for that. But yeah, Kodak Alaris has recently announced. I don't even know if they've announced it. I haven't researched so much on it yet.
Where did this news come from? I heard it from you, and I saw the article. Where did it come from?
I think
is it some like investor?
I think it's like a Business Insider UK is like Kodak Alaris is for sale.
Let's hope it's actually for sale. Otherwise, this episode is going to be kind of stupid.
Well, that's the point of this podcast, is that we might be very stupid and people can correct us. But we still can talk about it because I have a huge conspiracy theory about Kodak Alaris and Kodak Rochester.
This has been Nico's conspiracy theory for like
a year plus. Yep. And it's funny because it kind of is going towards what I said, and I didn't put it on camera, so now I will just be like, yeah, I knew the numbers for the lottery tickets. But so Kodak Alaris, if you don't know anything, Kodak went bankrupt in 2012, 13, something like that. And being as big as Kodak was, they owed money to a lot of different people. And one of them was the biggest, how do you call it when you owe money to someone? There's a technical name, whatever. The biggest amount they owed. Creditor? Yeah, that's what I thought. He's the linguistics guy. I'm Spanish.
Sure.
Barely finished high school. But basically, it was the retirement fund for the UK. So the UK retirement fund of Kodak, only Kodak, because that was what there was.
Yep.
So I guess in some terms and agreements, they came to the conclusion, okay, Kodak's going to continue making film, but we will give you this new version of Kodak, like if you cut an arm and you gave it to them and it grew into a different company called Kodak Alaris. But Kodak Alaris was not making anything per se. They didn't have a factory. They didn't have a production line. They didn't have anything but the catalog of Kodak film products for still photography to be sold. So they were just basically almost like a dealership.
Yeah, I like to think of them as kind of a dealership or a marketing company for the stills photography film. And it's important to distinguish this between stills photography and cinematography, and then also air surveillance film technically. But
yeah, so
only the stills photography is under Alaris.
Yes, so Alaris had permission or agreement to sell like Kodak Portra, Kodak Ektar, Kodak Trix, and so on, and that's what they were selling. But all the stuff was being made by Kodak in Rochester, which is where their first and I guess final factory is still there. They've had multiple factories through the world, but with the bankruptcy, many had closed already. Some closed after that, I guess. So this is Alaris. So Alaris basically, I guess, puts in orders with Kodak Rochester, and Rochester turns on the machines. They make toothpaste, and when it's finished and boxed, they send it wherever Alaris says. And I guess Alaris makes a cut out of that. And this was the pension fund. So that's sort of the reality of the story so far.
Since 2013, roughly.
Yes, somewhere there.
I think 13.
You can Google the articles and you'll find them. Just put Kodak bankruptcy and I guess it'll show somewhere.
It's a mess.
Huh?
It's a mess.
Yeah, it's like they filed like Chapter 11 or Chapter 13. The U.S. law and bankruptcies and stuff is different to Spanish, but yeah, which is where I'm from. But this happened, and for years, I guess a decade, they've been distributing and selling all kind of Kodak film products all around the world. They, I guess, had the contacts to the stores, distributors in the different locations, maybe countries, maybe like we're in the Baltics, so there's like a Baltic distributor because it's not that many. There's not so much of a market, so it's like Norway, Sweden, Finland, probably.
And the Baltics,
huh?
the actual Baltics.
Yeah,
Lithuania, Estonia. Latvia.
I studied Spain, man. I don't know anything about
for our
this
region.
part.
It's basically Focus Nordic. I think is pretty much the only
Yeah.
big distributor. So Alaris sells to Focus Nordic, and Focus Nordic sells to all of the
stores, including us at the store here.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has been happening, but it's been, well, from 2013 to 2023, where we're recording this, the film market has grown steadily.
Yeah.
2013, it really was small.
It was almost nothing. Like 2010 was the peak of digital cameras, and the real bottom of film photography came a couple of years after that, I guess.
Yeah, I started this YouTube channel in 2015, and the news, I think, 2016, maybe.
Great time. I mean, it was kind of growing in that time.
Well, when I started the news, what I would notice, and I still today, it's really sad, I notice, is nobody talks about film news at any size. Yes, everybody mentions when Ektachrome came out. Everybody mentions when Kodak Gold 120 came out. Everybody mentions those things, but nobody mentions like the small things. And I was noticing them, and I was following blogs and stuff at the time. I don't even remember who was around back then. Probably Petapixel for sure. Some of these bigger digital or photography, I won't say digital only, photography blogs were posting news, but nobody was posting like little startups like Valoy, for example, little things that were happening in the market that were interesting. And they were like, like little seeds in the film industry, because the big boys had died or left.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And then, I mean, after 2010, and then kind of the market started to recover in 2015, we did get like small startups, and they were small and kind of insignificant, but there was no voice for them. And your show has kind of been a bit of a voice for that.
Yeah, I've been trying always to fill in that, and that's why the show is sponsored for a bunch of companies, because I think a lot of these smaller startups didn't really have much voice in the market, so sponsoring the news was kind of like a good thing for them, and I really appreciate. But like I'm seeing a box of Cinestill right now from the corner here, and like Cinestill back then was basically nothing, maybe a concept in 2013, 14. Yeah. I interviewed them at Photokina 2016, and they were literally like nobody knew about them except for them. They had the Indiegogo for 800T. Right. But yeah, Alaris has been doing this, selling stuff, and Rochester making stuff. But like we said, the market had been steadily growing, but the supply had kind of been, I would say, like a hit bottleneck. The bottleneck of why is probably the elephant in the room. Nobody really knows except for Alaris, probably not even Alaris, maybe Rochester only. The assumption has always been the machines can't output enough.
Yeah, I mean, so from 2013, the market was small enough that the little machines they had running, it was covering the market. But then 16, 17, 18, they started, I guess, hitting the ceiling of what they could produce. And since then, pretty much, like basically as long as I've been in film, which is not very long in your timescale, which is like glacial timescale, it's kind of always been a shortage. Like not, when I really started out, there was still like C200 and stuff. But for it's been 10 years now with Kodak Alaris, and for almost 5 of those, there's been a shortage
of color film.
Yeah,
and mostly it's been color film and 35mm.
Yeah, 120 color film has been fine, and black and white has always been available.
And usually the consumer grade, especially, has been really hit with
which is where we've seen the growth. I mean, most people who've come into film has been point and shoot, color film, preferably the cheaper stuff.
Yeah.
It's not been the high end. Obviously, there's been growth in the kind of studio shooting 120 and stuff like that, but the huge scale has been in this sort of consumer grade stuff.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that surprises me slightly, and this is where I start with my theories. It's like Rochester letting go of the sales of film, which is what really started Kodak, I must have hurt so much business wise. Like the workers at the factory, the CEOs and whatever, and probably the CEOs don't care so much about film as maybe the workers that've been there for
Probably in
decades.
terms of pride, it hurt, but I can't imagine it was a huge amount of money at that time, and they were probably losing money on stills film at that time.
They probably were, but so just to explain, motion picture was always Kodak Rochester took care of it. So anything that goes on the movies for Quentin Tarantino or whoever's shooting high budget movies or low budget movies, 60 mil Super 8, 35 is all 65 even, is all going through the factory still. It's the photo part. So I feel like it always has been a bit of a thing that they miss letting go of it. I guess they are not proud of being bankrupt, obviously, and not proud of losing their basically core business, which has always been Kodak makes images, or what was it? You take the shot or you click the shutter, we do the rest. So they've lost that with Alaris. And Alaris hasn't done, I think, anything wrong per se for the film industry. They've just been trying to grow the brand and share film to everywhere. But Kodak Alaris was basically getting orders from distributors and stores. So basically, if I want film, I go to my store. Hey, where's Kodak film? And Kodak, the store says, well, I don't have enough. Let me call Alaris or my distributor and say I need 1,000 rolls. And they go to Alaris. So it grows the ball towards Rochester. And Rochester just has to try to turn the machine faster. That's the official story, is that the machine couldn't go faster. My theory...
And specifically in the past few years, the reason there's been, or what people have said, the reason we've had a shortage in stills, especially in 35, and not in the cinema, is that the finishing, so taking the big spool of film... Converting, yeah. So finishing, converting,
yeah,
I think that's similar. They take the big spool of film and put it into a little canister so you can put it in your 35mm camera. That process has been limited both by making cassettes. I don't know if you remember, at some point they were making the silver top cassettes during COVID, I think 2021 or something. They changed from a black top to a silver top,
yep,
which was supposedly because they ran out of the material, the supply,
or
couldn't
it was
supply
like
enough.
It was not enough, or it was way too expensive, so they changed to the silver.
Yeah, it was aluminium, anodized black, and then they switched to steel, which caused more problems apparently. But yeah, so the converting has been
the bottleneck, supposedly. So like I said, my theory has been, and I might be very wrong, like I said, this is completely based on my my reading of the news and the stuff, is that Rochester hasn't had so much of an issue converting the film, finishing the film to consumers, but has had more of like they have a grasp of the neck or the supply pipe to the finished product. And as consumers were growing and people were shooting more color film and wanting more cheap film because more people are picking up cameras, and these are people that have never shot film before, so are new users, they have been like, okay, there's a steady pace of film coming and orders, and Alaris needs 10,000 rolls, 1 million rolls, 2 million rolls, 10 million rolls, and we're talking the millions of rolls that are in the back order. Kodak has, in my opinion, has probably kept the lifeline of not going bankrupt in Rochester and being like, just feed Alaris just enough, but not too much. And that's made Alaris be in really deep trouble economically and supply-wise. And this has pushed them to the verge of what it would be either a bankruptcy or basically putting the business to sale.
Yeah, which is why we're talking about this now, is that we're pretty sure it was it was put up for sale. We should have checked our sources. But the idea would be that it's not profitable enough because they can't get enough stock, so they decided to sell it.
And that could be one of the reasons the price has been going up crazily. I think film has to go up in price. It was at a low, all-time low, and they had kept it low because there was a fight between Fuji and Kodak and the market, and they couldn't they would just keep it was probably the number of how low can we go to keep the machine running, maybe even losing some money, not investing anymore in education, not anymore in parts or spares or repairs or
basically
anything.
Running down the capital that they had.
Yeah.
Can we, how can we push prices down while we can, let our machines use spare parts from existing machines, not buy new ones, that sort of thing.
It's kind of going to the trenches in a business plan. You're okay, we need to try to dwindle down as much as we can to survive this. And I think the survival was there. They're still around. And now their market's going up and they're like, okay, we can start producing and educating. And if you've seen the videos from Smarter Every Day, you notice the making film is not just like, turning on a machine and making cookies. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of chemicals. There's a lot of procedures. There's a lot of engineering. There's a lot of all this stuff. And to me, the feeling has always been like, if the converting was the problem, which was finishing the cassette, which is super complicated per se. Like I went to see Harman's factory, Ilford, for those who don't know what Harman is. And the way they make cassette is impressive. Like it really is. Like it's 1970s tech or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's not so simple as we might expect, like the felt that goes glued on.
It's not, but at the same time, if you think about it, it's a mechanical product essentially. Compared to making film, it's a very different story.
Yeah.
Like making cassettes is an industrial process for manufacturing a mechanical product. It is completely solvable with a bit of money. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, the impression has been, from what I see, is like, I feel like Kodak Rochester, the heart of Kodak, felt Alaris letting go of the sales of film products, held squeezed the tube to only feed them enough to keep them just barely alive. And Alaris, I guess, got sick of it and has gone like, okay, well, screw it, let's just sell this.
Well,
and
the owners of Alaris, what's important is that the owners of Alaris aren't exactly passionate about Alaris. They are a pension fund. And the pension fund has decided this is no longer worth doing because we can't.
I've heard that they've never pulled that money out of it.
Interesting.
Which means I'm not, and this is what I've heard or read in some article. I can't remember. Like I said, I could be very wrong. But my understanding was that they never really pulled any benefits out for the fund. They were just trying to keep it going. And they even had how do you go when you postpone payments or something like that? They had some payments due, and I think they even got like a 5-year, hey, okay, just maybe pay us later, make your business run efficiently, make money, and then pay us. And now this is going for sale. My impression is that Kodak will try to buy it, Rochester. That's what I hope.
So your theory is basically Kodak squeezed, so when I say Kodak, I mean Rochester. Kodak Rochester squeezed Alaris deliberately, to go more or less deliberately, to be not very profitable, just to uphold the agreement, which I guess they had some kind of agreement that said you have to sell us a certain amount of film.
Yeah.
And they just upheld that just about. And then to the point where it wasn't profitable enough so that the owners of Alaris wanted to sell it.
Yeah, and Kodak could buy it back. And my theory...
And that is the interesting thing. If Kodak Rochester does buy it back, then your theory is confirmed, probably.
And no, well, I guess if it's in the market, it can be bought by anybody. Yeah, sure. And we've seen No Promise in China buy the chemical part of Kodak, which is another conversation for probably a different podcast.
Yeah.
My theory is if Kodak Rochester buys it back, I have a feeling that almost in a snap of a finger, suddenly supply chain is not a problem. And this is where I might be right or I might be wrong. And I could be completely wrong.
I think you could be really wrong.
Yeah, it could be.
But even if you're wrong, it is a massive incentive for them to go in and really fix the problem. Imagine you have, I don't know how many levels of retail there is, but essentially when you make a product at the scale that Kodak does, you have loads of levels between you and the consumer. So the film that you buy and that we buy has been in the hands of probably 5 levels, Kodak Alaris being one of those. And having this extra separation, not being able to sell directly to dealers, for example, Focus Nordic here in Finland, it takes a big cut. And it doesn't exactly encourage investment into the process to make sure that they can continue to produce it. So I think that's what's interesting about your conspiracy, is that even if it's wrong, it is interesting if they did go and buy it, because it means that there's much more incentive for them to invest in it.
Well, they cut out one player. So, like you said, if there's 5 levels from Kodak Rochester to the guy that buys it in a shop in Mumbai, India, if they cut Alaris, they're cutting out one player, which requires a bunch of logistics and redistribution and who knows what much, which might still have to be there. Maybe they buy Alaris. The only difference is now the money stays in the house. instead of Alaris money bank account. But like to me, it's like if we suddenly see Kodak Rochester absorb Kodak Alaris and we're back at Kodak only, we don't have to make distinctions between factory and distributor, or like we said, dealership. We could find that suddenly the supply is fine, because one of my this is where my theory stands a little bit of ground is, how come they can't make enough Color Plus or Color Gold or Ultra Max or all these stocks, but have found a way to make the Fuji film? Like, if you don't, like, I run a factory. I used to work in a wood factory. This chunky piece of wood here is from my factory. Let me lift it up. So I know what it is to have a steady supply, have problem with suppliers. We filed for bankruptcy, not officially, but almost went bankrupt a couple times. We saved the company. So I've been in the ugly parts of business, and it's very interesting. If you can't make the finished goods for a guy if you have an agreement for really low price because they have to distribute it.
Yep.
And you're like, I can't, they're asking more and more and more and more. You're producing. This is kind of like what IKEA does. Like, IKEA goes into a factory, says, hey, your factory is not good. Let me fix it. And then you're like a slave to IKEA in a way. And I'm not saying it exactly like this, so don't paraphrase that. But they kind of make you like on a lifeline of just producing for them. If you suddenly go like, okay, we were doing 10,000, rolls a day. Machine broke, we can only do 8,000, but suddenly you start putting 2,000 to the side for a guy that pays you double. It's very normal in business. And then you're like, continue going, like, the machines are not working, engineers don't want to get here, like, and this might be also fairly true, and I'm not saying it's 100% like that. Why is Kodak Rochester being able to supply, I don't know if it's Walmart's or Best Buys or whoever, the pharmacy stores in the US, with Fuji color film made in the USA?
And it's not just a one-off. They've now launched two.
There's the 200 and the 400 now.
So Gold and Color Plus are now found in green packaging, especially in the US, it seems like.
Yes.
We've seen some 200 in Europe.
They've come here.
Yeah.
They changed from Fuji C200 color film, color negative film, to Fuji Color 200, and it literally says in the box, made in the USA.
Yeah, it's definitely Kodak film.
It's definitely Kodak film. It might not be exactly gold or Ultramax. Maybe they throw one extra chemical to give it a slight greener tint or whatever, or maybe not.
It's the same thing.
I don't really know. The funny thing is that, like, if Kodak Alaris is not being able to receive enough of this film to supply, we're talking that we know from work in the industry that there's in the millions of back orders of rolls, which means the stores, like I think at work, have like 1,000 or 2,000 rolls of each color, cheap color film stock in back order.
I talked to our logistics guy at some point in the past few months, and I think he said we had standing orders from 2019.
Yeah.
Like things we ordered in 2019 that still haven't showed up.
Yeah.
So we have 3 years of backlog, basically.
Yeah. So if this is the case at every little store, we're talking Tampere, Finland, which if you Google it on the map, it's not exactly like New York. So if we have that, imagine London, Paris, Berlin, all these stores, Photo Impex, AG Photographic in the UK, Madrid, Fotocasion, like all these massive stores that sell to everybody. Why is Kodak not being able to supply Alaris with film, but is able to make an agreement with Fuji, which in my understanding was illegal because of their agreement, and make it? But then I got an anonymous tip on the news.
Ooh.
There's an anonymous tip from someone in the US based in Rochester, so I kind of want to trust it, saying that Alaris and Kodak had an exclusivity agreement for X amount of time, and that time has gone out.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Like, if they could sell to someone else in the period, why wouldn't they? And the original agreement must have been some exclusive thing.
It could be 10
and
years.
It must have been exclusive. Like, why would you set up Kodak Alaris, which is completely dependent on Kodak Rochester, if it's not exclusive? Like, you need this sort of exclusive deal if you want to have a relationship.
Yeah.
And if that's ending now, that's really interesting.
Yes. And this is when now suddenly Fuji comes into play, starts selling this Fuji color film made in the USA, which we're going to say it's Kodak probably. It's Kodak. Like, nobody else makes film in the USA in color.
Nobody else makes film, period.
Almost.
Color film.
Yeah, there's the other factories trying to do stuff.
Sure.
But like Fuji now is able to. So Kodak. So the thing is, Kodak Alaris owns probably the trademark name for Portra, for gold.
Yeah. So Kodak
for
Rochester,
Ultramax.
even though this agreement is expiring, Kodak Rochester couldn't go and sell Portra for 160.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah,
not.
it's like they own the brand name. So what Kodak Rochester, I guess, has been able to, or has done, or may be able to do, is repackage it with a different name. And who knows? Fuji and Kodak maybe have agreements that could go back beyond before Kodak bankruptcy or are brand new. We don't know. But it almost feels like you could theoretically call Kodak Rochester and say, hey, I want to make 2 million rolls of color film, 200 ISO. And Kodak might be like, okay, we can't give you gold because gold is Alaris's, but we could give you mold, which is
Mold?
yours.
Really?
You know, I don't know. Like I'm just trying bold, just trying to change one letter.
Bold.
And suddenly it's something that they can do. And that's what like my theory goes into is like, if they can't make enough for Alaris, suddenly they're making enough for Fuji, which they're probably selling maybe at more money. But then the funny thing is Fuji is kind of cheaper than the Alaris counterpart.
Yeah, so either they have more efficient distribution, so there are fewer people taking cuts along the way.
Or less cuts.
Yeah, or smaller cuts. Or they are buying it for less, or Fuji is just making no profit.
Well, Fuji could be making no profit because we know Fuji can live with no profit on film, and they're fine because they have they've like spread their business.
Yeah, they don't really
so many.
need the profit. They could be a brand exercise of just we're Fuji film, we want to stay in film.
I mean, they've said it that they will never drop film per se. So maybe this is the way that it's providing film to the people. It's just not made by them.
And what is really interesting is that if Kodak Rochester is selling this to Fujifilm, that is presumably better for them than selling it to Alaris. Like, why else would they do it?
It's better for Rochester.
Exactly, and that's the point. And that's the important thing here to me, is that whatever is better for Rochester is, what I'm for, basically. It's the only real color film factory in the world. It's super important that this stays alive.
Yes, I have friendships with Alaris. I've interviewed the CEO at Photokina. I've talked to him a few times through emails and other people at Alaris, so I don't feel...
No, I've nothing against the company or the people working at the company.
I'm just explaining, and this doesn't mean I have to lick anybody, and I don't have to be like extra nice, but they've been extremely nice always to me. They've supplied with film when I've asked for it and stuff like that.
They are a marketing company.
Yeah, they are a marketing company, but like that's the sad part to me is that like I wish it would have worked. I hope that if they do Rochester buy Alaris, they keep some of the people that are key to knowing the brands and knowing I'll say influencers, but I hate that term, but like keeping those contacts, because like I was contacted when gold was coming out.
Yeah, they've done a really good job, and they've also done like collaborations with in the UK. So they're based in the UK, and they've done collaborations with Analog Wonderland, I think, which is like one of the...
Yeah, they've done photo walks and they've done stuff like that.
And they've done like I think when E100 came out, they did. I'm pointing to this bag because it
says E100. Yes. This is the VS, which was vivid saturation. This is long gone
and long before Alaris.
And it's full of my undeveloped film, but just don't judge me.
One day you will develop film.
Yeah, I'll develop film again.
It's been over 2 years, and so he started working here 2 years ago, and he's not developed a single roll of film.
Our lab is basically the size of a bathroom sink currently.
It's not. So it's a luxurious lab for anyone who's not Nico. Nico just has a problem of being...
I had a really nice lab before, and now it sucks.
It's fine.
I went from owning like a Jobo CPP3 that Jobo loaned me, and a whole darkroom and everything like that, to suddenly being with a CPP2 with a not proper lift in a sink that fits the Jobo but not the pipe coming out. So I got my reasons to not be developing so much film. Plus, like now, it's funny how they say when you work on what you love, you start like not loving it as much. It's not that I still don't like photography. I really enjoy it. It's just like you kind of like finish work and the last thing you want to do is like get more into photography. You kind of like Arrow said, go get a beer.
Go get a beer. You've started skateboarding. I'm desperately looking for other stuff to be my hobby. It's working with your hobby is great fun, but then you need something else to do. Anyway,
Well, out of Alaris and Kodak Rochester, I don't have much else apart from my conspiracy that is that they've withheld the supply of finished products of conversion to Alaris to make them struggle to the point where they could be for sale. Rochester would buy them back. Suddenly the machines are all working, the turns are all working, and I think they have invested in more machines and more shifts. So now they're running instead of one shift a day. Like, shifts go in 8 hours usually in most countries, and 24 hours, 3 shifts. That's probably the reason for the calendar, because we're all here to work. But basically, they've gone to 3 shifts, 7 days a week. So like suddenly, and I might be very wrong, they buy it back, and suddenly everybody gets their thousands of millions of rolls. One thing I will say, it won't be at the price they probably ordered it. No. Which might break some contracts and agreements and bring some lawsuits or whatever, because I never understood 100% how these things work of the orders and agreements, because when we get those orders that, like you said, the logistics warehousing person here,
price in
we pay the 2019 price sometimes. Sometimes it's weird. Sometimes they respect it, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And we go and we put the prices sometimes at the market price, mainly because if we put it at what it should be in 2020 or 19, we'll sell all the stock in a second.
No, we've at some point we got secret.
And we're trying to supply. No. It's the funny thing is we're trying to supply so everybody can buy a couple of rolls. And if you put it at the 2019, someone will just buy 1,000 rolls and leave you with no stock.
Yeah, so and like shops will buy it, not like people who want to shoot this film. Like shops will buy it and then they'll sell it for 3 times the price in a shop in Paris.
We see that happen quite a bit where people buy from us.
We limited our color film sales to 10 rolls.
Yeah. And that's funny because anybody watching can be like, hey, you're buying at 2019 prices, selling at 2023 prices. Oh, you're hoarding.
I'm not sure that's true.
Sometimes it's not that far.
Okay.
Our main business is buying, repairing, cleaning, and refurbishing cameras.
No,
so
we don't make money on film.
Yeah, film is like 0.001% of this business. And I don't know the exact numbers. But yeah, our main core is selling cameras, so we're not too worried. We keep film in the store mainly as a, we do want to supply the community, the people locally. It's a service to the customers. This is even where Santa Color Film started. Harold's been running that project too. It's one of his many hats. Yeah, and this is like the stuff that we see. So yeah, to me, if that supply suddenly starts coming back, where we start seeing, I don't care if it's Kodak Gold, Kodak Color Plus, or Ultra Max, or anything like that, supplied to stores in the numbers that it should be. And I don't think they're going to just suddenly, fill in the 10 million rolls.
No, that's a lot of rolls.
Especially because the market might not be able to even absorb it. Because people have been ordering, because, you order 10, you get 10, then you just order 10 every time.
Yeah.
But if you order 10 and get 1, then you order 100 to get 10.
Yeah.
So you scale up your orders to get less because you're getting a percent roll.
And a lot of stores, including us in some cases, have placed orders with several distributors, and they try and get a little bit from there and a little bit from there.
That's one of the messes that I see as the distribution, and this is one thing that I've always been very upset about in a way, as being a user of film photography, then becoming, I don't know what you want to call me here on YouTube, maybe
YouTube personality.
Yeah, but I'm in the industry and I talk to some companies and we have drinks and I get invited and whatever, and it's not at the level you might expect. It's way worse. It's more bootleg kind of level, because film industry is not big.
It's a tiny little...
Yeah, but everybody always been super nice to me. But going from there to then working in a camera store and getting more information, I have also seen how, I don't know, it's just the film industry is just a bit of a mess. And one of the things that pisses me off is a lot of the stuff seems to be done at fairs where they spit at their hand, shook hands, and signed on a napkin while some very little dressed ladies were walking around. And they basically were like, yeah, you can have Voigtlander distribution for the rest of your life. And you go and talk to stores and distributors, and they're like, yeah, we can't give it to you. This is just we're happy with our distribution. And I've had this thing happen at work where I'm like, hey, we should try to sell, we refurbish cameras, and we refurbish Leica lenses, and we buy and sell them, and we do all this stuff. And I'm like, hey, it'd be great to have third-party lenses, like Voigtlander. And I've gone to distributions, and they've been like, yeah, no, we're happy with our guy. And I go to the store, and they have one in stock.
Yeah, they'll tell us who the finish distributor or
And
store.
we might be throwing someone under the bus. So
I don't know.
But I really don't like this like old school agreements where
they have these old agreements where some store that is not taking care of the brand is really supposed to be the one fronting it in the country.
not caring about film
and
anymore.
Not caring about film. No, of course not, because they got this agreement in 1993. And then you have us, who's now the biggest, well, at least we're the biggest film store in Finland by far.
Yeah, and I think in Europe, like secondhand wise, we're probably, if we're not the biggest, we're like the top 3 for sure.
And we can't get distribution of Voigtlander lenses because, retail of Voigtlander lenses because some...
And we just want to buy them and sell them because when someone's buying an M6 from us that's being refurbished and is not working like it should, maybe they want to pair it with a knocked-on lens or something like that. And this is what I find, if Rochester picks on Alaris and buys it, is I hope they... And I'm not saying sweep it and like destroy it, but like sweep it, and instead of having 15 levels of people sucking out from there.
Yeah.
And these people were core to the film business because it was the only thing back then. But
and
nowadays,
it was huge. And it was enormous. The scale was completely different.
But nowadays, many of these distributors might be selling toilet seats, but they have an agreement that gives them 10% or 15% out of a product sales for film photography. And they won't let go. And I've seen this again in the wood industry. I've seen it in different industries.
It's
won't
also
let go.
what happened with Tetanal.
There's
there's a good podcast episode with one of the people who came into Tetanal when they did the previous restructuring.
Yeah, they swiped.
Yeah, and they completely just declared it, and they could do that because they declared themselves bankrupt. Otherwise, it would have been breaking agreements, but because it's a company, you can just declare bankrupt, and then you're Tetanal number 2 or number 3 or whatever they are.
Tetanal 1846, I think, is the name.
Right. And because of that, they were able to kill off a bunch of old distributors that didn't care about the products anymore.
They go more direct to consumer or direct
and
to
store. And they
squished
the whole from like 5 levels to 3 levels or something.
Because we're talking like every time someone touches something, it gets a percentage. And this is the thing with film, like probably film leaves Kodak's Rochester's factory at like $1 a roll.
A little more than that, but yeah.
Yeah, but like I don't know the number. I'm making it up. Like I said at the beginning, disclaimer: we know nothing. But
no, we know what it sells at.
Yeah, but it's crazy.
And we know how much each level takes roughly. It's going to be 10 to 30% for each level, depending on how high up in the chain.
Yeah, but that's why like, and I'm saying like, one thing is if they swipe the distribution network or the like, I don't want to call it rats, but
they
the
can't
leechers.
Yes, I mean they're not leeches. I think it's evil to say that Focus Nordic is a leech.
I'm not saying Focus Nordic is a leech.
No, but they're part of they're one of the levels. But and they can't completely swipe it, but they can take away some of the old players that maybe aren't adding as much value. Like Focus Nordic, we just happen to deal with them, so it's easy for me to use them as an example. They're a good company that cares about the products they sell, but I'm sure there are other companies that are part of the ladder that don't care.
What my assumption for solving this distribution problem for photography products, film specifically, is I do agree that distributors, the old school distributors, should exist. Some of them. I'll say like 80% of them. There's probably that 20% that's selling toilet seats.
Yeah.
But they should exist for one reason. They keep the network of mom and pop shops in the middle of nowhere asking for 10 rolls a month.
Yeah, which is where you want to buy it.
And is where you would buy it. So this is like the supermarket. If you're going straight to the mega mall, you should get the mega mall price. But if you're needing to buy it in your neighborhood and down in the bodega under your house, then you're going to pay higher because that guy went to the mega mall and he's got to add his cut, or he has a distributor.
Yeah, and the alternative to that as a consumer is that you have to order from someone like us. Like we have people asking us to order film from us, and they have to pay 10, 20, 40 euros shipping, and which, then it's not cheaper than buying it from your local shop.
And I think like they should keep that level. So they should go ahead and say, okay, we made 1,000 rolls of Color Plus. Here, send it to the distributor in, I don't care, Lithuania. That guy gets the 1,000 rolls, cuts it into hundreds, and sends it to a second distributor that gets the hundreds and splits them into tens, and then goes into twos, and then they can go to the store in the middle of Lithuania, or not the middle, in the outskirts of Lithuania, where some old grandma is selling rolls while she does passport pictures.
Yeah, and they're going to be like 30 euros a roll.
And they're 26 euros a roll, which we see them here in Finland. We see stores here selling the film that we sell for 14 for 29.
And not just in Finland, like in Tampere. Like this is the
Yeah.
second, third largest city of Finland, and there are shops like 10 minutes walking from here
Yeah.
that sell it at double what we sell it
And
at.
what I'm saying is, I don't mind that because it's keeping the roots of film alive, even though there's crazy prices, and that's a different topic. But
I mean, price. I think we should talk a bit about prices, just because.
let me finish what I'm trying to say.
Go for it.
What I'm saying is, but they should start a more direct level. So we're in 2023. You can sell and package anything anywhere in like 24 hours.
Yeah.
We are no longer in the fax machine, order 10,000 container boats, all this stuff. It's no longer that level, but we are still working in that level. And I think people, and I'm not saying Kodak Rochester sends you 10 rolls to your shop in Alabama, but I'm saying Kodak Rochester should be able to have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 hubs in different continents that then ship in the hundreds of rolls.
Yeah.
And stores can get them because there's stores in many places that want hundreds of rolls, and they should get them without so many steps. The prices should be a little lower. It's just basically like a wholesaler, a little lower, and then you can feed the community, because the guy that's buying from a store, like, I don't know, I'm thinking New York and let's say Brooklyn Film Lab, Brooklyn Film cameras. Sorry for that mind burp. So they might be selling 1,000 rolls of film a week. And they should be able to get a better price than the mom and pop shop that's in the middle of a city in a different state. There's 10,000 people living around them, and they sell 2 rolls a month because one grandpa still shoots trains on film, and that should exist. There should be a faster lane to get these supplies. Like, we could sell 10,000 rolls a month if we got a special price, and then we could distribute it to. I mean, we're not saying distribute, just sell it. And same with photo impacts and stuff. So like, cut a few middlemen. There should be 2 channels.
And I think what's crucial there is not just to lower the prices to the final consumer, but also to increase the profits for Kodak Rochester, who actually makes the film.
Yeah.
That's something that we've not talked about, that the scale of production these days is tiny compared to what it was in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's so much smaller that I'm amazed they can produce this product at the price they can produce at.
Well, they're living off the fact that when it was the heyday, they developed everything to be so good that they can continue. I just watched the Polaroid factory tour from Brand Fraternale.
Really good.
I'm forgetting everybody's YouTube channel today. But in an instant.
Brand
Fraternale. You see what they're doing at Polaroid, which was Polaroid Originals before and Impossible Project before. They managed to buy the name. This was the reverse of Alaris almost.
Yep.
You see the factory and what they're doing. They're capable of doing what they're doing because back in the whenevers, they made all these machines because they were able to do 20 million units a day. And now that they're doing 100 units a day, they're capable of doing it.
They're doing surprisingly many. I was surprised by the tour how many they do. But this is why it was so important that the Impossible Project saved the machines in the Netherlands. It wasn't the only factory, but it was the last factory, and it was the last factory to be scrapped. Well, it wasn't scrapped because they bought it. And if they hadn't done that, we would never have Polaroid again, because rebooting that is incredibly expensive, and the current volume is not at all worth it.
It's not worth it.
Even if you had the recipes and the technology for it, which we do, there's no reason. Like, you could never, just those injection molds that we're using for the cassettes, those are incredibly expensive. They're hundreds of thousands. They're very high volume injection molds. They're hundreds of thousands to make. I think the guy in the video said, I don't know how much he knows about it, but I think he said it would be millions to make this machine again. And he's right. Because it's not just buying mold; you have to buy several molds and test them.
That's why we agree that if someone had to make more money and supply and continue, it's Rochester, because it's the core. At the end, that's the farmer planting the seeds for us to eat our produce. Yeah. So like, the guy that has a truck that brings it to your house is important, but I'd rather the farmer make the money. So we're talking almost like, like when you buy from a food market and you're buying straight from the farmer. I rather support the farmer
Yeah.
than support the lorry driver that just picks it up and drops it. And I support everybody in a
Not
way.
because lorry drivers suck. It's just
No.
because the farmer is more crucial to the process
Yeah.
of making this thing, especially when the farmer is making
Nothing.
the only apple in the world. if this farmer was the only apple maker, you would want to keep apples alive.
Yeah. So yeah, to me, I hope it continues. I hope Alaris survives being bought by somebody. Hopefully, the buyer is Rochester. If a third party comes in, we're back with the same game. Who
Or
knows?
a worse game.
Worse
if it's
game.
true that the UK pension fund never took money out of Alaris,
And someone tries to take money.
and then someone buys it and tries
Film
to
will
take money.
go, woo!
Yeah. It could
And
be
maybe
bad.
we'll see a lot more Fuji film made in the
Yeah,
USA.
and that might be an out. Like it literally might be an out that if Kodak is able to sell to other places, that might give Kodak security because it means that Alaris can't just push the prices because Kodak will just sell to someone else.
And hopefully, I don't know. I really don't know all the details on the agreements, on the rumor being true
We know
or not
nothing,
true.
basically.
Yeah, we're just
Conjecture.
elucubrando in Spanish. Yeah,
Conjecture.
basically, yeah, just talking about what
Yeah,
could
there
be
are,
or could
there,
not
there
be.
is a bunch of scenarios here, and most of them are bad, and maybe one of them is really good.
And I think Kodak is still too core to fall, like just per se. But I do think that the process of from making it to selling it at the stores can go very wrong.
Yeah.
And we can see prices of film triple if the wrong player gets them, or sustain themselves if Kodak buys them. I don't think we're going to see film prices dropping.
No. Things tend to not go that way.
That's another thing I see all the time is like, oh, they're just hoarding and buying boats. I don't think that's exactly the thing that's happening here. I think it's more in like the complicated levels of agreements and distributors and cutting and people that are making, and like I said, people that are making their cents or percentage per roll, if there's less volume coming through, have to raise the percentage to cover their costs or their operation. And that's why sometimes film goes up from Alaris, and sometimes it goes up from Rochester, and sometimes it might be going up from your local distributor or local importer. And this is something I think has happened in Japan, if I'm not mistaken. Like the importer has just decided to bump up the price, and it might not be a Kodak thing. So don't always blame Kodak for things.
Kodak Rochester.
Yeah, for things that might be coming from different places. And it's, I mean, we love film. We feel the price of film. We shoot film, and we want it to be cheaper. Don't get me wrong.
We shoot a lot of film.
Yeah, too much. But it's really much more complicated. And like I've seen the industry from within, sort of. Yeah. I guess I'm like a referee on the corner, but it's way more complicated. I've seen I've seen so far one factory. And it's super impressive. And respect to everybody making film, distributing film, selling film, continuing to stick to film, because it's really not a money-making machine.
Yep.
You're better off selling selfie sticks from China.
Yeah.
But people are still in it, and we're still in it. And
somehow.
Yes. Well, I changed jobs just for film.
Yay.
I think I made a video that was like, I work for film, basically, in a way.
Film slave.
Yeah, but it's pretty cool. And this whole thing is super complex. We probably will never know the exact details and reality of what agreements are not there. Those are signed in closed doors, and probably the people there and not much else know. And like I said, we could have hit the nail or not.
We could be completely off.
Yeah, we could be completely off. It could be completely other things. But that's what it feels like to me from what I see. And one thing also is like everybody I've seen in the film industry, from Alaris to anything else, is like super committed to it. They love film. They shoot film. It's become way more of that than what it used to be. Like I feel like the film industry in the 90s or the 80s were people that love film, but there are a lot of people that was just a job. And nowadays it's like really most people are super committed to it, and they take it with a lot of passion. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting, and I hope it survives. Because Kodak going down would be really bad.
Yeah. Are we leaving the film price discussion for later?
You can talk.
No, I think the only thing that worries me about film prices, if they go further than they are now. Like I've been a supporter of the film prices going up. Don't lynch me. For the past 2-3 years, but they are reaching a kind of euro per shot, even on 35mm film, especially after development. You're like beyond the euro per shot, which is interesting. It's like everyone's talking about this film is slowing you down, and that's starting to become really true. Like when it was, you could buy a roll of Color Plus for €5. It wasn't. I mean, you weren't much slowed down by it.
Yeah, the thing is, I was shooting film before Arrow was born.
Yeah.
And it was funny because you wouldn't shoot stuff for just the sake of it. Like, and that's what I said, I think, in a few videos, and maybe I can't remember what I say and what I think.
Well, I've seen your slides.
Yeah.
You were shooting your slides for the sake of it.
I was shooting skateboarding.
Yeah.
And I stopped shooting film because I had got a girlfriend, and it was got to choose, take her out to dinner or buy film.
Yep.
And I chose dinner.
Yep. And people, that's the concern, is that people will choose.
We're getting to that level.
Yeah.
And I think like what I saw, and one of the reasons of the resurgence of film is because it suddenly was something kind of affordable, and it was different, and it was fun, and so on. And I think it still is keeping that stamina pretty well.
Oh, for sure. No, I think at the level it's at, it can still be a fun, like, this is different and interesting enough
and
to...
shooting your eggs and beans on film is still going to happen.
Yeah.
It just, people will maybe try to shoot them better, I hope.
No, they'll still be bad.
They'll still be bad. I don't know. I think, I mean, people will shoot whatever they want. I also always, like, every time we talk about film isn't expensive, I always look at the younger generation and I'm like, what phone do you have on your pocket? And they're like, oh, I have an iPhone. And it's like, well, that's €1,000.
How often you replace your iPhone?
How often do you replace it? So like, but people have their choices and they can decide what's expensive, what's not. I'm not going into people's picks and choosing.
I think what's difficult about film is that it's a very tangible, ongoing expense. Like with a digital camera, you can pretend to yourself that, oh, I'm going to buy the latest A7 R5 for €4,500. And you can pretend that, oh, but it will have great resale value, and I'm going to keep this forever. So there's no expense to shooting it. But I mean, in reality, you get a different one after 4 years. So it is.
We can make a whole podcast of is digital cheap or is film cheap? I think it's much closer than we think.
Yeah.
I think like you said, you buy a camera, even in secondhand, and you use it, and 4 years, 5 years, yes, every click is free theoretically.
Yeah, but how many keepers do you have from that?
Yeah, it's so complete. It's such a mess of a conversation.
No, it is a mess. But I think what's important there is that psychologically it feels much more expensive to shoot film because you're paying per click.
Yeah.
And you get that expense. You know, if you shoot a roll every week, you get that expense every week.
I mean, it's like buying a car and hitting the gas. Like every time you hit the gas, you know you're paying. It's true, you're paying.
I don't own a car, so I don't know.
I can tell you, like every time you hit the gas, you're going, oh, that's a couple euros there, or a couple of dollars there, and and you feel it. And I think film is that, and like I think it's bringing it, like we're going, I've said it in videos, but like we're going towards what it was, where film was a more meditated thing. It was a bit more like you would think about what you're shooting. You wouldn't just go like, I mean, the people shooting film today are way more in the, shoot whatever.
Yeah.
I go to a festival, I buy a point and shoot, I shoot my friends, we have fun, it's a fun thing.
Yeah.
But like they won't care so much, but they're paying £200 for the festival price. They're paying £200 for the extra substances they're taking at the festival, and they're paying £200 or euros for the film and the camera and the development. So like it's just another added thing, and that's the target audience currently.
It is, and that's where most of we think that's where most of the growth has been too. If that segment suddenly, if it is like you say, and it goes more towards like a meditative, either like hobby or commercial stuff, because I think that's also something that's going to happen. Is medium format used to be a professional format for a reason. It was really expensive. The cameras were really expensive, and the film was really expensive.
And then it went to everybody,
and then
now
everyone
it's going back to it.
Yeah, everyone could buy a Hasselblad, and the film was €60 a roll, so it didn't really matter. But now it's back to the film is €20 a roll, and the Hasselblad is 4,000. But I think if we lose that segment, the market might stop growing, or might even come back a little bit.
I don't know. I really don't know what will happen with all of that. And like at the end, people just want a roll of film to shoot.
Yes.
And like I think out of 10 people buying a roll, probably 6 just go to the store and say, "Hey, can I have a roll of film?"
I was in a shop in the UK. We used to live in Edinburgh in the UK, and visited my local photo shop. Now I was back a few months ago, and this girl came in and had absolutely no clue. But she was really keen, and I talked to her afterwards, and she was, just one of these people who like the look. They have no idea what they're looking for, which is probably not the viewers of this podcast.
Nope. But it's good to open their eyes
great.
too.
It's yeah, and she got help from the person behind the counter to pick her film, and she was very happy.
Yeah,
and it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Barcelona too at a store from a friend of mine works, and he was like, people come in asking for like, I want a Yashica, and he's like, well, Yashica what? They're like, a Yashica, because they probably saw someone on social media shooting and they saw the name, and they don't know. But like that's one of the reasons film is growing. I've said it many times. I am more of an old fart that is not the target anymore. I buy 10 rolls a month maximum if I'm shooting a lot. And
not now that you have the
not
digital.
Nowadays.
Not now when you have a digital camera.
We can talk about why I bought a digital camera in a different episode. But like, I think it's way more. And yes, we were core to the non-death of film, but we are also now we're still the lifeline of film. So like basically when film died, there was a lifeline of people continuing to shoot film. I consider myself one of those that bought film and bought cameras and bought lab services and chemicals. But we're still that bottom line. The difference is not so much us, it's the other people. I don't think there's more 40-year-olds shooting film than there was 10 years ago, maybe even less because it's getting expensive. But I think there's more 20-year-olds, more 25-year-olds, more 15-year-olds shooting film. Well, probably like any, because there were probably none almost 10 years ago. Or it was just a guy that really liked photography and he researched it.
Really likes people
more of
a
geek per se, and I was myself a geek. But yeah, like that stuff, and it's kind of important to see. And this is why I'm saying like all this industry news and what's going on with Kodak, they don't see the difference with whatever it is. Like they're the ones buying Fuji Instax saying, hey, I want to pack a Polaroid, and they just buy Instax. And what camera do you have? It says Instax. Okay, well here, hand Instax. And they're the ones buying film and saying, how do I shoot black and white? And you're like, well, you buy a black and white roll. And they're like, oh, I thought, that kind of stuff, which is completely respectable. I got nothing against that. They're the future of film and the future of the industry.
It's the growth of the film, at least. It's been in the past 5 years. It's been the growth, most of the growth.
Yeah, and it's the shotgun approach. There's, you shoot, there's 10,000 pellets going out there, and 4 or 5 will hit the target, will become you and me, and shoot for years and decades to come. Yeah. And that's what we need. And the industry needs it. But yeah, I think
we've wrapped up.
We wrapped up quite a bit. We've gone off the rails at the end, which is fine. That's how podcasts go. But yeah, I would love to hear it. This is going to go on YouTube, which means there's comments. Ooh. So I don't really know we're going to put the podcast as a podcast per se.
Can we turn off the comments?
No, it's fun. I like reading the comments. There's always beef. Someone will correct us with a lot of statements.
Yes, all of our factual statements.
And one thing that I wanted to say, and I should probably throw this at the beginning of the podcast also, is supposedly YouTube Music app lets you listen to video podcasts as audio without paying.
Nice.
So if you feel like it, that might be it. I don't know if I feel like uploading this to Spotify. and Latercast and Late FM or whatever.
We'll figure it out. Maybe not this episode.
Maybe not. But yeah, if you have any comments, let us know. Yeah. This is the No Name So Far podcast.
NPP.
NPP. We should make t-shirts, But yeah, let us know what you think about the Alaris thing. I do think they're going for sale. We might be very wrong. If it is, correct us. But yeah, I hope that it ends up well. See you guys in the next podcast or whatever this is. Bye.
I'm fucking cold. It's freezing in here.